The rising tensions between the world's two most powerful countries, the United States and China, after several military close calls. In the most recent incident, U.S. Indo-Pacific Command says a Chinese warship came within 150 yards of an American destroyer above the Taiwan Strait. These images were captured by Canadian broadcaster Global News. Tonight, both China and the U.S. are standing their ground. ABC's Elizabeth Schulze reports tonight from the White House.
Tonight, tensions flaring after that Chinese warship nearly collided with a U.S. military destroyer in the Taiwan Strait. Canadian broadcaster Global News capturing the Chinese vessel cutting across the path of the American ship on Saturday, coming within 150 yards of the U.S. destroyer. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin issuing a stark rebuke to China's government.
Do the right things to rein in that kind of conduct, because I think accidents can happen that could cause things to spiral out of control.
But overnight at a security summit in Singapore, China's defense minister defended its warship, telling the United States to, quote, mind your own business, and calling the U.S. and Canadian military presence in the Taiwan Strait a provocation.
But U.S. President Joe Biden's troubles don't end at West Asia. China, too, is testing his administration's patience. Key leaders seem frustrated. They're now expressing their anger in public. Like the U.S. Secretary of State, yesterday he slammed China.
It's clearly in the interest of both countries. The most dangerous thing is not to communicate and, as a result, to have a misunderstanding and miscommunication.
So what is Blinken talking about? This encounter in South China Sea. We told you about it yesterday. A Chinese jet buzzed American spy plane last week. Look at how close that fighter was. The American plane's cockpit was shaking. Blinken called China's actions dangerous.
Chinese pilot took dangerous action in approaching the plane very, very closely. There have been a series of these actions directed not just at us, but at other countries in recent months.
He's clearly unhappy. One American newspaper described those comments as scolding. What's fueling this? China's decision to rebuff America. U.S. wants to resume dialogue with China. They want to keep lines of communication open. But the Chinese refuse to play ball. This week, they had a chance. U.S. Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin is visiting Asia. He reached out to his Chinese counterpart. They were supposed to cross paths in Singapore at a security summit. Perfect opportunity to sit down and break the ice. But Beijing refused. They rejected America's invite. Austin himself wasn't pleased. He has now issued a warning. Austin says the situation could go out of hand.
I'm concerned about, at some point, having an incident that could very, very quickly spiral out of control. But again, I would welcome any opportunity to engage with leadership. I think defense departments should be talking to each other on a routine basis, or should have open channels for communication.
Obviously, he's talking about what happened in the South China Sea. And he's right. Any mid-air confrontation raises the risk of conflict. It has happened before in 2001, again in the South China Sea. A Chinese fighter and a U.S. spy plane collided. The Chinese plane crashed, its pilot was killed. The U.S. plane was crippled. It landed in China. The incident led to a standoff. China did not release the U.S. aircrew. For 11 days, there was considerable back and forth and a lot of blame game too. China demanded a formal apology from the United States. It didn't get one. Instead, U.S. said it had regretted the incident. There was no formal admission of guilt, and the American crew was released. That's how the standoff ended. What would happen if the same nightmare were to repeat? It will not be the same. A lot has changed. China now has a much bigger economy, and its military has undergone sweeping modernization. In terms of pure numbers, China has the world's largest navy. So the PLA won't shy away from a fight. Xi Jinping on repeated occasions has asked his troops to prepare for war. This week, he asked them to improve their readiness. The Chinese president met his top national security officials. He asked them to think about the worst-case scenarios and prepare. I have his statements with me. Listen to this. He says the complexity and difficulty of the national security issues we now face have increased significantly. We must adhere to bottom-line thinking and worst-case scenario thinking and get ready to undergo the major tests of high winds and rough waves and even perilous stormy seas. And so, that message came with specific instructions. Xi Jinping wanted his officials to speed up the modernization of China's national security system, even enhance capabilities. He also asked for improvements to internet oversight. How would America see this? Xi Jinping is not showing any interest in diplomacy. Instead, he has prioritized strengthening his military. Perhaps the Chinese president wants to negotiate from a position of strength. But under present circumstances, there are no signs that a dialogue will resume. Maybe America will respond again by bolstering its own defenses. And that only raises the specter of conflict.